Emily Turner had always prided herself on being the kind of woman who could walk into any room and command attention without ever needing to raise her voice, the kind of woman who thought of herself as composed, sophisticated, and perfectly in control of her life, with her blonde hair always styled just so, her wardrobe immaculately curated from designer boutiques, and her manicured nails shining like polished ivory. But behind all that perfection was a woman who carried insecurities she dared not speak aloud, insecurities that festered quietly, eating away at her sense of being the perfect wife and mother she tried to project, and at the center of those insecurities was Mariah Johnson, the nanny she had hired years ago when her daughter Sophie was only 3, a kind, nurturing black woman in her 30s who had walked into their home with a smile as warm as sunlight and a patience so deep it could calm even the wildest tantrum, a woman who had quickly become indispensable, not just for her ability to cook, clean, and care for Sophie, but for the way she seemed to understand the little girl in ways Emily never quite could. Sophie adored her from the beginning, clinging to Mariah's legs when she arrived each morning, laughing uncontrollably at the silly songs she sang while brushing her hair, and whispering secrets to her at bedtime that she never shared with her own mother, and though at first Emily brushed it off as harmless attachment, she began to notice that when Sophie fell and scraped her knee, it was Mariah she called for, not her. When Sophie had a nightmare, it was Mariah who could soothe her back to sleep with a gentle lullaby, not Emily's stilted attempts at comfort, and when Sophie drew pictures at school of family, she often included Mariah's smiling face right next to hers, labeling her with crayon letters as Miss M, while Emily's own figure seemed stiff and distant on the page, almost like an afterthought. Emily tried to ignore the growing pang of jealousy in her chest, tried to tell herself that this was what she paid Mariah for, that this closeness was a sign of good childcare, but deep down she hated it, hated that her daughter seemed to love another woman more than her own mother, hated that when other moms at playdates remarked on how lucky Sophie was to have such a devoted nanny, there was often a subtle undertone in their voices, a kind of suggestion that Mariah was filling a role that Emily herself was failing at, and every compliment given to Mariah felt like a knife twisting deeper into her pride. The breaking point came on a Saturday afternoon in early autumn when Emily and Sophie attended the birthday party of a classmate, one of those extravagantly themed affairs held in a rented play center, where balloons bobbed against the ceiling and children's laughter filled the air, and as Emily stood chatting with a circle of mothers, one of them, a sharp-tongued woman named Claire who had always delighted in subtle digs, glanced at Sophie playing with Mariah, because Emily had, of course, brought her along for extra help, and smirked as she said, "It's so sweet how close your daughter is to her nanny. Honestly, it's like she's the real mom." The other mothers chuckled, some with awkward sympathy, others with thinly veiled amusement, and Emily's cheeks burned red as if she had been slapped, her smile faltering though she quickly recovered with a tight laugh, but the words burrowed into her chest like acid, echoing again and again, like she's the real mom, like she's the real mom. Until Emily could barely concentrate on anything else the rest of the party, watching Sophie run into Mariah's arms with unfiltered joy, a joy she rarely, if ever, showed for her. That night, as Sophie slept upstairs in her pink, fairy-lit room, Emily poured herself a large glass of wine, pacing the living room with resentment simmering in her veins until she finally called Mariah downstairs, her voice sharper than usual, her eyes cold and distant as she said, "Mariah, I think it's time we end this arrangement." Mariah blinked in confusion, her kind brown eyes wide as she set down the laundry basket she had been carrying, and she asked softly, "Mrs. Turner, did I do something wrong?" Emily swallowed hard, her pride overriding reason, and snapped, "You're overstepping. You act like more than just help. You are not her mother, and you need to remember that." Mariah's lips trembled, her heart aching because she had never intended to take Emily's place, only to love and protect the little girl who had stolen her heart, and she tried to explain, "I never meant, Sophie just needs love, and I give it to her because she deserves it," but Emily cut her off with a wave of her hand, her tone final and merciless, "You're fired. Effective immediately. Pack your things tonight. And don't say goodbye to Sophie, it's better she learns to live without you now." The cruelty of those words stung even Emily as she said them, but she forced herself not to flinch, watching as Mariah's eyes filled with tears, as she silently gathered her belongings from the small guest room she had used during overnight stays, pausing to linger on the crayon drawings Sophie had made for her, pictures with stick figures labeled, "Me and Miss Mariah," surrounded by hearts. And though she longed to tiptoe into Sophie's room for one last hug, one last whispered goodnight, she honored Emily's command, slipping out into the night with her suitcase, her heart breaking with every step away from the home that had become like family, her tears falling freely as she whispered a quiet prayer that Sophie would understand someday. The next morning, Sophie woke to find Mariah gone, and when she asked where she was, Emily forced a smile and said, "Miss Mariah won't be coming back, sweetheart. It's just us now." But Sophie's face crumpled in confusion, her lip trembling as she whispered, "Why? Did I do something wrong?" And when Emily tried to assure her otherwise, the little girl wailed, retreating into her room, slamming the door, and refusing to come out for hours. In the days that followed, the lively, bubbly child seemed to vanish, replaced by a withdrawn shadow of herself, refusing to eat breakfast, dragging her feet to school, staring out windows with vacant eyes, and sketching only sad, gray pictures in art class. Emily told herself it was just a phase, that children adapted quickly, that Sophie would soon forget Mariah, but at night, when she peeked into her daughter's room and saw her curled up clutching one of Mariah's old scarves, crying softly into the fabric, Emily felt an uncomfortable guilt gnawing at her, though she stubbornly buried it beneath layers of justification. A week passed, and then one chilly Wednesday morning, as Emily was rushing around the kitchen trying to pack Sophie's lunch, the phone rang, its shrill tone cutting through the silence, and when she picked it up, she heard the steady, concerned voice of Brookdale Academy's principal. "Mrs. Turner," the principal said, "I think we need to talk about Sophie. Something happened today at school." Emily's pulse quickened, her fingers tightening around the phone as dread pooled in her stomach, and she asked quickly, "Is she hurt? Did something happen to her physically?" The principal sighed softly, replying, "Not physically, but emotionally. Sophie had a breakdown in class. She refused to participate in activities, and when her teacher tried to encourage her, she burst into tears and shouted that she wanted Miss Mariah. She kept saying that you didn't love her the way Mariah did. We had to take her to the nurse's office because she wouldn't calm down." Emily staggered back against the counter, her chest tightening as shame washed over her, because hearing those words from an outsider made it undeniable. Her daughter saw Mariah as her real source of comfort and love, not her, and for the first time, Emily wondered if she had made a grave mistake driven not by reason but by pride and jealousy. She rushed to the school, her designer heels clicking frantically on the polished floors, and when she reached the nurse's office, she found Sophie curled in a ball on the cot, clutching a crumpled drawing of her and Mariah together, her cheeks streaked with tears, her small body trembling. Emily knelt beside her, reaching out gently, whispering, "Sweetheart, Mommy's here," but Sophie turned away, burying her face in her arms, sobbing, "I want Miss Mariah. She's my real mom." The words sliced through Emily's chest like glass, sharper and more painful than any insult she had ever endured, and as she sat there in silence, her daughter rejecting her embrace, the weight of her choices pressed down on her like a crushing tide, forcing her to confront the truth she had long denied. She had fired not just a nanny but the one person who had given her daughter unconditional love, and in doing so, she had wounded her child more deeply than she could have imagined.